Hello and welcome to the Wise Why. I'm Andrew. There. Oh my goodness, I love it when things go completely wrong on the introduction. And that is the joy of the Wise Why. I was going to say my name, and I never say my name because it's about the guest. So this morning I am joined by Akin Odulate. I think I got that correct. Did I get it correct?
Got it. You nailed it.
Awesome, awesome. Now, Akin is a thought leader. He is an inspiration, and my goodness, his life is full of just joy. So, as usual, the Wise Why is not about me, it is about my guest. So, Akin, over to you. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Akin Odulate. Cafe Latte Odulate is how I always pronounce it, and that seems to work. I'm a about a 30-year veteran of the transformation and change management um, discipline, and I am originally from Nigeria, but I did grow up in England. I went to school in England. And I left to come to the States in the 80s, late 80s, to go to university, where I started out studying filmmaking before I moved on into the business world and consulting, which is what I've done for the last 30 years.
I
I
love
live,
that. I love the fact that one, I didn't know that you'd been schooled in England, which is fascinating. Obviously, our love of the film industry is what brought us together and helped us to really connect. But can you where did you go to school? I'm intrigued.
yes, well, I left West Africa on a balmy January week and arrived in West Sussex in the middle of winter.
Ouch.
And that was interesting for a 8-year-old boy. Yes, I went to school in Wisborough Green in West Sussex. I was there for a few months, then moved to another school in Sherborne. Um, and then my high school was in Bedford School in Bedfordshire. And then I was in London and did my A levels and then moved to the States.
So why the move? I mean, you've obviously transient moved around, and I love West Sussex. My parents live in East Sussex, not West. But wow, I mean, how and why? How did you get from Nigeria, England, the States? What took you to the States?
Um, I was trying to figure out as I did my A levels, and you know, it's the interesting thing in the UK, you do your A levels, and it's really straight after O levels, you're really specializing. And I couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do. My family was all science oriented, math, physics, all of that, and I liked that, but it wasn't me. And my father said to me, you know, you've always had this affinity for kind of film and entertainment. You want to think about that? And so I researched. I said, well, okay, that sounds exciting, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll test myself. I'll apply to the top school. And I searched around, researched, and I said, well, the University of Southern California Film School is the top school. So I applied and I got in. And that was when I realized I'm going to the States.
So the film industry. I obviously I didn't get to Hollywood. I did some low budget movies where I mostly ended up on the cutting room floor, and I did lovely TV and BAFTA award winning dramas. But there is something that draws you into that industry, isn't there? What was it about the industry that just hooked you?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you, mine was not the entertainment side. Mine was the education side. So I'll tell you a fascinating story. I was struggling when I was doing my A levels. I was initially, like I said, doing the sciences. I was doing some pure math, and I was struggling with um, three-dimensional equations, partial equations, and a part of math that does all these long equations. And I'm a visual processor, as I found out later in life. I think in pictures, which is good for film. But I struggled with it, and I was sitting down one Sunday when the BBC show Panorama. came on. Panorama was doing, no, not Panorama, Horizon. It was Horizon. Horizon was on, and they were doing a show on some physics, and they described, they had a scene in which they described the difference between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. And they showed this grid, and they showed a dot in one of the cells. Said that's you're looking at 2 dimensions. If you added a third dimension, that dot might actually be a pencil sticking through the axis. So that dot became a pencil because it had a length to it now, which you couldn't see in 2 dimensions, and it blew my mind. I was like, I went back upstairs to my room, pulled out the equations, and I saw them differently for the first time. I'm like, oh my God, that's what's going on. I just need to understand what this equation is about, what parts are moving, it just gave me a whole visual understanding of equations. And then I had no problem solving them. And I thought to myself, they're teaching this stuff all wrong. They're teaching it wrong. So I had this conversation with my father, and that was what really triggered the idea. Why don't you do film and do educational film? Let's make educational stuff that and teach it in this way that appeals to you. And then there's a whole bunch of people out there who would love that. So that's really why I went to film school. I really didn't go in to do Hollywood film. I went in to understand how and why film works and how I could apply it to education.
Wow. So I was terrible at obviously I'm dyslexic, dyspraxic, and math is something that just eludes me. I can add, subtract, I can do my tax, but an equation, oh my goodness, I missed that Horizon episode. I wish I had seen it, because maybe, like you, I think in pictures, so that would have been absolutely fascinating. So you arrive in America, you're studying, you're at the film, is it film school or university?
University of Southern California Film School, which
And
was
Uh, am I not correct that you ended up on camera instead of just behind the camera?
yeah. So in film, yes, I did. So in film school, I basically the curriculum is really about throwing you in and making a make film as many as possible. And back in those days, we made Super 8, and then we moved on to 16 mil, and then the final year, you did 35 mil. Um, but I did a couple of student films, and I always say I did them well because after that, everybody wanted me to be in their films. And then the university had some commercial stuff they were doing, and the film professor says, "Akin, could you step in and help us in a role?" One thing led to another, and I started showing up in all these films, and then that kind of naturally graduated on to getting some work off Broadway. Did some work off Broadway, so it was interesting. And when I was um, graduating from film school, my professor called me and he says, "Again, I want to say something to you. I want you to think about something. You've done fine. You're graduating. You're getting this film degree, and I know how well you've done in front of the camera. Um, but I believe that you have a unique talent for communication, and I believe that you've done this degree in filmmaking. You're behind the camera, but the talent is before the camera, in front of the camera, and your talent is in communicating, and your talent is in articulating um, in a way that really connects with people." So she wrote me this fabulous recommendation list. "I'm giving you this recommendation letter. I want you to walk across to the Annenberg School for Communication. I want you to go to the dean and give him this letter from me. And then I'm hoping you'll do your master's in communication management because I think that's so." That was
So,
high up from behind to in front of the camera.
sorry, I've got a hair. I love it when you go live and you actually have no option than to just go with it. So, just communication, film
Mhm.
industry, on
Mhm.
camera, off Broadway, and then suddenly you're now this amazing thought leader. You are advising incredible companies. You know, I've looked at your website and I am blown away by the people you've worked with. I'm blown away by the sectors you've worked in and what you do. Can you expand a bit more on that? Because it is fascinating. A lot of people say to me, if you come from the arts, is it useful for business? And I always say, absolutely. If you come from the arts, you've got a great foundation in communication and in business. I would love people to understand what you do today.
Yes, absolutely. So, my area of specialty is in what's called change management, organizational change management, and in this days transformation also. And the best way to think about uh, change management is, you all know, everybody says that it's the truth of our time, right? Change is constant, it's always happening. And so when you say you're managing change, what are you really doing there? And really, organizational change management is this discipline that's focused um, on the performance interventions that organizations are trying to do. They're trying to do things better, and they come up with different ways to do it. Often it's technology. We're going to put in a new technology that's going to help us do X, Y, and Z, and that technology is going to help us do better. Organizational change management is about taking those changes and what you call operationalizing them, which is making them the day to day. So they start out being a special project. I'm going to come into your home. I'm going to put in this new fangled tool. Then, in your day to day, that newfangled tool is designed to make your day better, allow you to do things better. And where OCM, as it's called, steps in is to help you figure out how to make that special project become a day-to-day event. Does it really work? Does it do the things? And that's where you really get into the question of, what exactly am I expecting this new tool to do for me? And what exactly do I have to do to make sure that I am leveraging it to its fullest? So if you think about it, and here's the link to me is in the way my mind works. If you think about acting and filmmaking, that is in a sense what we're constantly trying. We're introducing a story, a scene, an actor, an actress. We're introducing a quote unquote a foreign element into the reality of the audience. And what we're trying to do is locate the story, the actor, the scene, the set in a way that's going to further the cognition of the audience, help them move further. And so that's really what you're doing. And often when I would get a script and I have to play a part, um, that was what I was doing internally. How do I make this character me? How do I become that character? So it's this change. How do I make it day to day? I remember um, often recognizing that there's certain aspects I couldn't get into of a character. And then I would find out that the only way to do that was to acquire a physical attribute that I wasn't doing before. So some characters, for example, some scenes, for example, were called for me sitting down saying something. I could only do it standing up in some. So it's that whole thing. How do you make that work? And it's movement on both sides, both the character and the scene, both the subject and the object. And that's what change management is really doing. But we do it inside of corporations, we do it inside of organizations, we do it inside of departments, we do it for individuals, we do it for, and that's what we're trying to help them. And it's all aha moment. If you really think about it, the one thing that joins all of that together is communication.
I genuinely love that. And it's interesting because what you've touched on there is something that I use in my coaching. And actually use it from a sales perspective. So I ask people how they serve. And I use, and I'm sure you know these 7 questions very, very well, Stanislavski's 7 pillars, those 7 questions of that we use as an actor. We ask, you know, where am I? Who am I? Where do I want? Where do I have to be to get where do I have to be to get to what I want? And I'm sure you've used those. What do you
Absolutely.
think? Now, I have a big thing where I just think this is how, what, why, where, the questions that everyone talks about in business. Well, actually, Stanislavski was alive in the 1800s. So
Yeah.
it's not, so I have this big thing where I think thought leadership is nothing new, but there's a lot of people that have done it really well. And I'm going to go back to Stanislavski, I'm going to go back to Plato, Aristotle, and I'd love to see if you agree with me, and you might not, that there is a link here, because it's not necessarily about new, it is about understanding it. And as you were describing the pillars and the building of the characterization, I was just thinking back to your pencil and that equation. So I'm just wondering how I managed to get there, actually.
Well, that's what's happening when you're communicating effectively. What you're doing, you're helping the audience make the connections. And one of the best ways to do that is through allegory, example, and all of those things, which the great philosophers and thinkers of our time have always leveraged. That's how they've helped us open our minds to, like, oh, it's almost like, the phrase, "Oh, I see," said the blind man, right? That's kind of what it's all about. Is this internal vision, this inner vision, and and when you look at the power of the great thinkers, any great thinker, they're switching on that internal inner vision. They're giving us that because if you look at the work of and one of the ones that I that one of the thinkers that really connected with me as I studied film, Lucretius, um, he had a fascinating view of of how we understand. And there was a phrase that he put together in one of his works, and I'm not going to butcher the Latin name, but but you can look it up. He was a Roman. He said, "How similar is what we see with our minds to what we see with our eyes?" And that to me was, and it showed up in all my, film essays and stuff I had to write about. I would always find a way to drop that in because I was like, oh my God, that is right on. That's really what it's about. Um, that's what we're communicating. That's what we're bringing when we put our films together and we put our plots and all of that. What we're trying to do is connect with the mind's eye. And if we can do that, then we've got access to everything else. We can make the mind see. And I remember one of the off-Broadway plays that I did, which I helped write, um, and it was a political satire, but we used that as the basis where all the characters were blindfolded and they interacted with each other. And in the political space, I thought it was a perfect metaphor. When politicians go at it, it's almost like they don't see each other, right? And all they're doing is pushing their own. And so we had this great skit where this play where politicians, people were taking political positions and they were blind. And the only one who could see that this is ridiculous was the child. So the child's like, take the blindfold off.
Wow. Sorry,
Right?
I'm just, I have to, because right now, as you can imagine in the UK, wow, that is so poignant. Um, yeah, wow. Wow,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that, because I think that's actually probably how 99.9% of the UK are currently feeling.
Yes.
Like,
Oh,
it is, I think we're all feeling like we're in a farce, actually, and I don't get political, and I will try not to. I will get off my soapbox, but that was you can imagine where my brain went there. Thank you for sharing that. um I want to ask you who inspired you, because wow, as we said earlier, Nigeria, England, America. Where are you now in America?
I
Because
live
obviously,
in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is
wow.
East Coast, 2 states down from Washington, D.C., which most people know. So, um, that's where I'm located now. And, in this day and age, um, where, travel is, I spent maybe the last 10 years traveling every week, just about different clients, different locations. And now that we've got, the post-COVID era where we can do a lot of things remotely, I end up less travel, but more connections. So that's kind of where my life is right
So, as I said, I was just asking who inspired you because you have had the most amazing life. It blows my mind. So, who has inspired you along the way?
now. I have drawn inspiration from several different places. Um, my parents initially, because my mother was Muslim, my father was nominally Christian, but wasn't really practicing. He was more of a thinker. And so at an early age, um, I had that juxtaposition of, and then coming to England, a Christian country, so I was close to my mom, and I wasn't Muslim, but I would do all the stuff with her. I'd go to mosque, I hadn't, but my mother was really wanted us to understand that religion had a role to play in our lives, but not in the dogmatic sense. She wanted us to have it in the mix as we thought through stuff. And so when I was going to England, she brought me across. She says, "You're going to a Christian country. And here's what I want to say to you. Um, I want you to pay attention when there is religious talk, but from an inclusive way, right? Not, we're all the same. And there's much wisdom in what religion brings." So, I had that, and I remember my first school in England were people from all over the place, from Iran, from India, which is like an international school. And I'll never forget that the one of the people who impressed me the most was a Hindu friend of mine. And I loved his countenance, the way he was. And I said, "When I read the Bible and all this stuff, it sounds like you're talking about him, right?" So I had that idea that what underlies all of this is that I had a concept that the importance of the things we experience in life is about how we can um, organize them in a way that they relate to each other and they shed light on each other, as opposed to being this kind of dogmatic, I am this versus that. So I was always open to, and that kind of came from my parents. And then in later years, I did find the Baha'i faith, and that's the principle of the Baha'i faith, which is the oneness of humanity, the oneness of God, and its social teachings are all about how do you bring oneness together. And when you start in a world that's so diverse, so it's unity and diversity and they seem like they are opposing, but as we know in this age, they're not. And in fact, for us to be who we really are, we have to embrace that diversity in a way. For you and I to be, for me to be who I can fully be, I have to embrace the fact that you're different, but you are the same. You have all the same needs, rights, loves, and everything that I have. And until we're doing that, we end up spending our time fighting one another and trying to keep. And as one, I never forget going to a Jesse Jackson campaign when he was running. I was I just got to the States, and I used to be the president of the African Students Association at my university, and we get invited to certain things. And he was running, and I got invited to this event. It was my first political event, but I'll never forget what he said. He was talking about the Israeli and Palestinian situation, and he said, um, there's no freedom in war. We talk about we want freedom. There's no freedom in war because even if you're winning the war, you got to keep the gun trained on the other person. You're not free to go do anything else. That's your lot. You're there pointing the gun, right? And so this excuse me, this dynamic um, of unity and diversity really kept building. And that the biggest influence in my thinking and thought has been this constant relationship. Anything that's going to bring about unity and oneness, not uniformity. We're not saying everybody going to be the same. I'm not saying that. That is exactly the opposite. Someone described that as the unity of the graveyard. That's the only time when anything's the same. You uh, so a vibrancy, right? And that requires it does require thought in how we go about relating with one another. It really does require thought, articulation, um, and a discipline.
Thank
And
you. That reminds me, everything you just said there reminds me of I think it's a Graham Kendrick, something, or this is going back to my childhood. It's a song that goes speck, speck, speck in your brother's eye, log, log, log in your own eye, eye. Take the speck out of your brother's eye to see the log in your own eye. That's very badly paraphrased. It's based on a Bible quote. I
yeah,
cannot remember
yeah,
where it is, but I know that it was one of those songs that absolutely still to this day I hold, because I'm well aware that to judge someone, you have to look at why you're judging and your own bias first. And we all have bias. And I'd love to tell you I don't, but what I do try to do is be aware and go, no, that's my problem. Let's move it on. And it's not easy. It's not easy, but thank you for that reminder. I
well,
really, really, really appreciate it. I also want to ask you about your aha moments, and then you get to turn the tables on me and ask me a question. So there must have been points, because you have pivoted, you've changed, and you've evolved. So there must be some major aha moments along the way.
oh boy, yeah. I think the biggest aha moment. Um, you grow up, you're full of ideas, and you're charging your way through life, um, and the biggest aha moment was the recognition that you don't have all the answers. You may not even have the right approach. And it's what you just kind of touched on. Self-awareness is the biggest thing. Um, some of the great thinkers, Rumi, you know, Socrates, Plato, have in some way referred back to, I think it was Socrates to say the greatest gift you can give someone is the gift of self-awareness, right? That's you giving, but also for you, right? True loss is for him to spend his life in utter ignorance of his own self. I think of us as the aha moment for me came when I was my son, my eldest son, when he was born, had a gift. He was only about 2 years old. He had a gift for jigsaw puzzles, and I was working them with him, and he would be way ahead of me. And initially, when he started, I thought he was wrong. No, that's the wrong piece. Right? And then we found out it's the right piece. And it happened 2 or 3 times before I realized you need to get out of the way. This kid's got something that you don't have on all the stuff. And he just would. And it got me thinking. Um, our existence is very much like, and I've talked about this idea that we're all one, and I really believe that. For us all to be one and we're all different, it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle, right? It's like all the pieces are different, but they fit if you find the right fit. They fit to get the big picture across. And that was an aha moment that until I understood who I was, how I would always run into situations where I think they're wrong or this is wrong or because I hadn't figured out what my approach was, what my biases are, what my prejudices are, right? Because as human beings, as physical beings, we require prejudging for security, right? We scan the environment and we see something that's off, and the first thing we want to make sure is it a threat or is it friend or foe, and we're doing that. And unawares to us, we take that same mental construct and we put it into our social, and we look at people friend or foe, right? And then we get to the point where we become self-aware enough to know that your perspective of friend or foe is entirely coming from your own vision. And if you understood who you were, you would understand why that feels like a foe and why that feels like a friend. But that doesn't mean it's true. That doesn't mean that's the truth. So all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a minute. I got a lot of work to do. I remember turning to my wife then and I said, I just want to apologize. I had no idea I was this difficult to live with. And she started laughing. She was like, what? Yeah. I always kind of felt like, hey, if everybody did things the way I said, it'd be great. It'd be great to live with me. And then I realized, wait a minute. She says, we're all like that. Yeah.
I know I'm difficult to live with. I know that.
Understanding why that is. And my wife, that was my first wife, my wife now, we're very different in the way we problem solve. But we've gotten to the point where we appreciate that difference,
Yeah.
right? And what we do is, well, I'm like, I've got this thing to do, and I need your superpowers because that's not me. I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna muck it up, right? I'm gonna try to make it, into my world, and I'm pretty sure that's not what's needed there. So those little jigsaw puzzles was the big aha moment for me that I had to figure out how I am. That's when I started learning things like, oh, that's why I had trouble with, because I also had dyslexia, but I think in pictures. I'm a systems thinker. What do systems thinkers do? They link things together, my jigsaw puzzles again. Well, that's not always the appropriate answer and the appropriate, it's contextual. And I say to my clients now, I say to them, I'm thorough, but I'm not fast. If you're looking for speed, I have a consulting buddy of mine who you should talk to. He can parachute in and he can get things going. If you're trying to understand how to reorient and transform, so you have to understand what it is you're trying to do and get to first, I'm your guy. It takes a little longer, and it's a perfect thing to do. Bring me and my buddy over, and I can do this piece of it, and then he can do that piece of it, right? And we can. Um, um, so that was the aha moment, and it's never left me. That's the thing that I try to every day when I have my moments of meditation and just sit back to think about. It's always about how the dynamics of who I am played in the experiences I had during the day, and what of those experiences are really about my perspective. What was I generating in there? Not so much, oh, the other person really take me. If when someone ticks me off, it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction for me to go figure out why, right? Because there's people that love that person just the way they are. So so yeah,
I love it. I really do. I think that's really important that we remember that we are individuals. It's so yeah. I genuinely love that. And one of the reasons my husband and I work is because we are totally individual. He is completely the opposite of me. I'm the creative. I'm the noisy one, and he is steady and he's there. He is the solid rock that I absolutely need to lasso myself to. So this is where the tables turn. You get to ask me any question you want. I have to see if I can think on my feet, and it just takes the pressure off you because you've done an awful lot of the. I've done a lot of the questioning, and thank you. It's been absolutely brilliant.
wonderful. The question I always ask, and I always teach my kids to ask themselves, but also be ready to answer, and it's constantly evolving, is why did you choose to do this?
Hmm.
And I
So
told them there's only one wrong answer, and
what's
that
that?
is somebody told me to do it. Someone made me do it.
So I didn't choose to do it. I did it, and that is indicative of me. I've been thinking about this quite a lot because I was talking this week at an Oxlep event, and they asked me to talk about my business journey, and I call myself an accidental solopreneur because I like to jump on the surfboard, and this probably is the actor in me. I like to jump on the surfboard and just ride it and see where I land. and then look at what's happened. Or I called it, a lot of people call them quantum leaps. I call them Alice moments. So I jump into the white rabbit's hole and I spin down and I will eat me and drink me on the way down. And then I'll get to the bottom and I'll land and I'll go, oh, what's this adventure? So I kind of fall into things, but I fall into things because I want to fall into things. So it's not that it's not planned. It's just I
It
want to
is.
push the boundaries. I want to
Yeah.
see what can happen, and then I want to see what I can bring to the mix, and what I can add. And it's a bit like baking a cake. I
Hmm.
never know if it's going to turn out all right, and I've had some disasters, but it's the fun of the journey.
Beautiful. I love that. You know what I love about that? Um, it's reflective of the confidence you have in your own awareness. And
Took me a long time.
I've
I've
my youngest son is has some struggles right now, all centered around that aspect of it. And everybody looks at him and sees the genius in him, right? That's not how he sees himself. And so he's having that time where he is trying to love himself, struggling.
yeah.
He's struggling. Um, so when you talked about the deliberate seeking the Alice moment is something that terrifies him because he doesn't love or trust himself. He thinks his and everybody who's worked with him, has been around him, has the opposite understanding. Um, and it's one of those things where um, he has to come to that realization, and he's doing some therapy, and like we all are. And I was grateful that he initiated through some prodding. He initiated that, and he's beginning to have some moments, and and I said to him that I can't imagine if I never had that issue of a lack of confidence. Um, and I said to him, it's a double-edged sword because I can sit here and I can recount to you. I said to him, I can recount to you things I've done with absolute confidence, which I cringe about now. I said, oh my God, I can't believe I said that or I did that, and I felt so sure. I said, so this is a balance, and I said it's an extreme.
Just to put things into perspective, 20 odd years ago, I followed the white rabbit into a hole and I shook up my entire life and I looked the black dog in the face and I said, you can't have me. And
Hmm.
up to that point, my confidence was low. I didn't believe in myself. And it took a long journey to get to where I am. So if your son does listen to this, I really had to tell. And I remember the day I said to the devil, you're not getting this one. You're not getting me. I am going to rise and I'm going to become the phoenix and I'm going to keep going. And that's where I saw the white rabbit. So it wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And I think that those are you know, life without those moments wouldn't be life,
Yeah.
almost like just not recognizing everything that we could be. Um, and it's almost like, you have to, that's part of it. To unlock that mystery and that promise, you have to, you have to jump in the hole.
You do.
You know, depending on, how your hole is dimensioned. Yours was experiential, do something different. Mine was more cognitive, think differently. you know how do you think differently about this?
Yeah.
And that shone a light like, oh my God, I was so sure about that, now I'm not anymore. So I can't just go on my cognitive skills and think that that's the answer. Every time, and I say to people now, I said, when are you most concerned about something? When I think I'm absolutely right. That's when I'm concerned.
On that note, I think that's a lovely note to finish it on. That when you think you're right, you could be wrong. I love it. Thank you so much for your time. It's an absolute pleasure, and I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you this morning. Thank you.
Kirsty.